Howdy, sup, how we doing, my little freaks and geeks? Depending on how long you've been around, this might feel like deja vu. 2 years ago, I ranked the big 3 franchises, and I've gained about 15,000 new subscribers since then. One of the franchises now has 2 brand new films, and I am a completely different person now. Movies hit you differently at different points in life, and so I thought it might be a fun tradition to start re-ranking the big franchises every couple years, just to see what changes, and it turns out a whole lot has changed. I went back and I watched that original ranking video, and it was a tough watch, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm actually gonna include some clips from that old video just to show you how dramatically my views have changed on some of these movies. I also had such asinine logic for certain things, like I ranked Freddy's Revenge at number 25 because it didn't fit in well with the franchise, like boo! I also had to retroactively cut out a clip of me saying that I was sad about Johnny Depp no longer being employed by Warner Bros, like ew. That's the beauty of your brain developing and getting older, because then you realize how cringy you were in the past. What's exciting is that if I do this in another 2 years, I'll be 25, so my brain will be fully developed. I'll be a real woman. I'm just kidding. I'm not a man or a woman. I'm a much more sinister secret third thing. So if you want to come with me on that journey, then click subscribe and the notification bell so that you don't miss the next one. That was an insane transition. Anyway, onto the ranking. This is a disclaimer, not in the interest of preserving annoying people's feelings, but more like an invitation for annoying people to shut the fuck up. This is my ranking. I don't give a shit if you think I'm going to hell for putting your favorite movie at the bottom of my list. You have to be a special kind of delusional for a stranger on the internet's ranking of these franchises to be the biggest problem you face in a day. So let's grow up, maybe. Yeah, let's keep the comments respectful. I don't judge anyone where they rank things because entertainment value especially is highly subjective. So we're gonna be going worst to best today and partially reacting to my old ranking video because almost not a single movie is in the same place that it was on my old list. Starting with the first movie of the day. Step right up, folks. What used to live at number 22 on this list has now dropped all the way down to 33, and that would be a one Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. I used to have this higher because I love the work of Danielle Harris, and I guess back in the day that was enough to kind of save this movie for me. When I watched it this time around, I became increasingly aware of how little plot there was. There was nothing going on. Like, this is far and away the messiest movie of any of the movies in this franchise, and for whatever reason, that just became clear to me. Though if you love seeing Dr. Loomis terrorize a young child and, you know, scream at everybody else too, then this is one of your better options. I find this movie hella annoying, and they kill off one of the best characters of the entire Halloween franchise for what? For what? In all fairness, I did give this movie 1 star, while I ranked the next movie at a half star. And that movie at number 32 would be A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead. I reasoned that, hey, this movie might be a stinking pile of crap, but at least there are really cool practical effects. Also, they at least attempt a bit of a plot, what with Freddy's family relations and all. In Halloween 5, everything good about Halloween 4 is retconned and ultimately has nothing to offer. Freddy's Dead might be a little bit more insufferable to sit through, but at least it offers something. If in another 2 years, future Kylie is like, oh my god, Freddy's Dead is like one of my favorite movies of the thing, I'm gonna bully you up front about that. Be quiet, don't say that. Please never say that. I already have to bully my past self for praising this movie and putting it above Halloween 3. When I looked at it more of like a dark comedy rather than a horror movie, or rather than even a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I was like, you know, it's the humor, it's not that bad. It's also still really creative, and I don't like the CGI involved with a lot of the death scenes, but the death scenes themselves are still very creative. No ma'am. The next one also moved all the way from 21 to 31, and that would be Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. I actually do like this one. I know this one is not a fan favorite, but I found the twist in it to be highly fascinating. I also think that a lot of the characters were pretty likable, which the same cannot be said for a lot of these movies. But in this movie, we also follow Tommy Jarvis, and I think this was probably one of his most interesting plot lines, because for a lot of the movie, we're like, is Tommy Jarvis doing this? And then we get the plot twist and it's, oh, I think it's good. Like, I think it's genuinely a pretty well-written movie. At least in terms of the storyline and surprising us as the audience, it was effective for me. Past Kylie is, como se dice, embarrassing. I don't know what exactly I found likable about these characters, aside from maybe the little boy and his grandpa, who were on screen for, what, like 5 minutes? Knowing the whodunit twist the second time around made me realize how painfully boring this movie is. At the time, I also praised it for finally being something different in the franchise, but once you know who the killer is, that's kind of stripped away. And it becomes weird and annoying watching Tommy Jarvis become this broody dick with a temper problem, because it's like, for what? Once you know the twist, when you go back, it's impossible to like Tommy. I'll admit that its uniqueness did still make it worthy of putting it above those other two movies I just mentioned. This next one, another movie I do not enjoy. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. The story in this movie sucks, and Freddy is so mean-spirited, and not in a fun way, like towards characters that you don't like. The only reason I nudged it above those other movies is because the dream sequences and the practical effects are really cool. And I have a soft spot for Alice and Dan, which is partially a negative because they can't catch a fucking break in this movie. And the whole child thing, I don't even want to get started on the whole unborn child pregnant Alice thing. But interestingly, the 5th movie in every franchise made it into my bottom 4 of this ranking, when in my last ranking, they came at 20, 21, and 22 all in order. Makes you think. Or maybe it doesn't, I don't know what you wonder about. So moving on up the ladder, Jason Takes Manhattan would be next. This is always kind of surprising for some people, but yes, I actually like Part 8. I loved the fact that we were finally not at Camp Crystal Lake, we were on a boat. I thought it was a lot of fun, because one of my biggest complaints with the Friday franchise is just it's recycled plot after recycled plot. This was finally something fresh. Another one bites the dust, babes. I told you that old ranking would be embarrassing. I have now rewatched Jason Takes Manhattan twice, and my experience upon both rewatches was the same. This movie sucks. The first time around, I think I just felt refreshed that we were finally in a new location in the 8th installment of that franchise. It also has a campy sort of MTV vibe to it. But the second and third time around, again, it's like Part 5, where once the novelty wears off, it's got nothing going for it. I mean, I still relish Jason punching a kid's head off every time though. And I will probably continue to revisit this movie because I love Kane Hodder as Jason, and there are some good kills. Coming in at number 25, we're finally talking about a new film, Halloween Ends. You guys already know this movie sucks. If I had to review this movie as its own entity, then maybe it would be a different story, but I think that's a dumb take. I don't like when people are like, well, just view it as a standalone and then it's better. And I'm like, no, because that's not what it was intended to be. It's different for a franchise like Friday the 13th, where they never cared about continuity. Halloween Ends, part of a trilogy, okay? Very intentionally a member of this specific timeline of the Halloween franchise. So don't give me any of that hogwash. So don't give me any of that hogwash. Yeah. It's an interesting concept that I would have loved to have seen explored in a different timeline, but as is, it's a very unsatisfying end to what was otherwise a great trilogy. In fact, it sullies the other movies of the trilogy a little bit, because now when I watch those, I won't be able to keep this movie out of my mind, and I'll know what's coming. The reason why it's here and not even closer to the bottom is because at least a lot of effort went into making a unique film. A misguided effort? 1000%. Yes, they took it in the wrong direction, but an effort was made nonetheless. Now here is where things get muy interesante. Rob Zombie's Halloween falls at number 24, which is technically where it ranked last time too. It was at 23 before, but back then Halloween Kills didn't exist. And I might as well say my number 23 now, because that would be Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I didn't purposefully put them together here, but they both do hit me in this very distinctive way where I appreciate the intention, but the execution is kind of garbage. What's hilarious though is how I used to feel about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. I'm sorry, Rob Zombie, but Halloween 2 is literally one of the most garbage, god-awful movies I've ever seen. It absolutely deserves to be last on this list. I had no love for Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 to the point where I put off doing a comparison of it to the original Halloween 2 for an entire year. That video came out about a month ago, and my perspective has done almost a complete 180. Listen, I still only gave it 2 out of 5 stars, let's not get crazy. But being able to step back from the shock of Michael suddenly hallucinating a glowing horse will allow you to pick up on a few other things. In the director's cut, for example, Laurie's arc is treated really well in the first 2 acts, until Zombie completely loses his grasp on what a realistic depiction of a mental health crisis would be. So points for the relatability and the performances of everyone involved, but otherwise, Up next would be Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. I have a real soft spot for the theatrical cut of of this film where they forego any cohesion of the plot and they're just like, yeah, more gore and mayhem. Plus Paul Rudd, he's the reason for the season, baby. If he wasn't in this movie, I'm so sure it would fall like number 30 on this list, but alas, he's there. Now this next one will be a big surprise if you have recently rewatched that old ranking of mine. Jason Goes to Hell has clawed its way up from the depths. During my Friday series and during that review, I was like, you guys need to tell me, like, are there any redeeming qualities to this movie? They brought in all of this like mythology with his family that had nothing to do with any of the other sequels, that had nothing to do with the original, and also Jason wasn't really even Jason for most of the movie. So it shall likely forever live at number 30. No baby, you were so wrong. This is why we should never be so set in our ways. Since that video, I've now rewatched that movie and reacted to it with Slasher Pepper, who then surprised me with the director Adam Marcus. I got to pick his brain about the movie personally, so yeah, I probably have a bias. Who cares? This franchise has no consistency. It's a pretty terrible quality anyways, so I feel like I can view Jason Goes to Hell as its own film. Again, very different to Halloween Ends, which was an intentional cap to a trilogy. Jason Goes to Hell is the only Cronenbergian Friday. It has some of the goriest kills, and it genuinely has some good filmmaking, like good lighting and composition, but beyond that, don't have too many nice things to say. Up next in the hot seat would be Friday the 13th Part 3. I know this one gets a lot of love from fans out there, but I only put it up this high because I like the third act and the final girl. The rest of the movie completely lacks an engaging plot, like it's so pointless. In fact, I'd rated it at number 28 before because I'm so sure the first time I watched it, I was completely zoned out by Act 3. So I probably paid a bit more attention this time around. Speaking of things moving around, this one dropped all the way from number 9 to 22, and that would be the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Oddly, almost all my opinions about it are the same. Back then, I went on a ramble about how great Katie Cassidy and Jackie Earle Haley are, and I might have praised the lighting. I still feel the same about that, but now I'm just way less forgiving about all the awful things about the movie. I used to be able to excuse having a lame Nancy because I thought that Jackie Earle Haley was so great, but then upon doing my comparison to the original, I realized just how hollow the remake is. The beauty of the original is that Freddy sees Nancy as his equal. It's much more empowering and interesting that way. I'm sure I don't really need to reason with you people about that movie being awful, so marching onwards, up next would be Friday the 13th Part 2. I don't find this movie particularly engaging until Act 3, much like Part 3, but this movie has Ginny. Enough said really, but it might be shocking that this movie falls right under the original Friday the 13th. I don't really know what it is about this movie, but the uncut version specifically I really enjoy. It's so laid back, there's absolutely no plot, no strong characters, it just stays afloat on the vibes alone. I don't think this movie gets enough credit for how gorgeous it is. It is the most well-shot Friday movie of them all. Maybe the nature location did most of the work for them there, but all the rest of these movies also mostly take place at the camp as well, and they don't look nearly as good, and so the only time that I will excuse a movie not really having a plot is if the vibes are good enough, and for this movie I think they are. And Kevin Bacon is there, I mean come on. But the main reason why this is also mid-tier and not lower is because of the final showdown with Miss Pamela Voorhees. This shit is so ridiculous, I'll be cracking up every single time. Seeing Pamela slap the shit out of Alice will never get old for me personally. It's probably my favorite moment in any Friday movie. So moving on up, we have Freddy vs. Jason, which is here solely for its entertainment value. I think it definitely suffers from choosing the wrong final girl. I can't really stand a final girl that's just like whimpering and crying the whole time. I mean, Catherine Isabel was right there. And Kelly Rowland, also right there. I also don't love how mean-spirited Freddy is in this movie for some reason. I feel like other movies of his franchise kind of better strike a balance where he's also really playful and you can kind of laugh along with him. The remake fully commits to him being gross and mean, and I feel like that was a good choice for that movie. Where I feel like Freddy vs. Jason didn't really walk the line well enough between that and the comedy. I'm actively rooting against Freddy in Freddy vs. Jason, where I feel like generally I see him as an equal because it's fun to see him contrasting against the protagonist. In this movie, I'm just like, God, why is he even doing this? Otherwise, this ludicrous early 2000s time capsule would probably be higher up on my list. And it's because it has one of the most epic showdowns of either of those franchises combined. This next movie fell down quite a lot. That would be A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. I had this one up so high last time because I loved this movie the first time around. I'm never gonna get over how amazing the practical effects are in this movie. There's a whole documentary about it on YouTube. I still love good old Alice and Dan the second time around, and this movie has some of the best kills of the entire franchise. I mean, a girl turns into a cockroach, like, come on now. But upon a rewatch, yet again, some of the novelty just wore off. You realize yet again that, hey, there's not really much of a plot here, and Freddy is starting to turn into a cartoon villain. This one fell very far from grace. I used to have it at number 4, and it now sits at number 18. Things change, people change, what can I say? I suppose I've just become less forgiving at the ripe old age of 23. Or have I become more forgiving? Because up next at number 17 would be Friday the 13th from 2009. I wasn't hating this movie, but the problem with this movie is that there's like a 2 to 5 minute little prologue, then there's like another 25-minute prologue, and then the movie starts. It's just really unnecessarily terrible writing, but it's not a good movie. It's truly an abomination. From 27 to 17, this movie really slashed its way into my heart. Not really, I'm still not a huge fan of it, but it definitely satiates any early 2000s itch you might need scratched. I maintain most of my opinions, like the nudity is way too gratuitous. It was 2009. If you want to see porn, just use the internet. And the 2 flashbacks that start the movie I think are a little bit ridiculous, but the second one has some really good kills and sets the tone well. It's just never a great sign when your movie needs 2 flashbacks right off the bat and we don't start the actual movie until what, like 20 minutes in. Also, none of the characters are likable, which is fine. I guess it makes it more fun when they die. Especially with the character Trent, I feel like the movie is definitely more self-aware than I give it credit for because it feels like it's definitely making fun of him. And the kills in the movie are really fun. Like I said, I love Derek Mears as Jason. I think he's the most dynamic Jason we have. Much like Kane Hodder, he really makes him feel like a character, but he is even more athletic than Kane Hodder's Jason. So I'd never say that this movie is terrible like I used to say, but I don't think I'll ever claim it to be good, so I think that it's fair to put it at mid-tier. Same for this next one, Jason X is at number 16. Didn't enjoy it as much this time around, but as I watched it, I couldn't help but think of Crimes of the Future, because there's this scene where a girl is nipple clamping her professor, and it's ridiculous, but it's kind of sweet. It reminded me of a Clive Barker interview that I featured recently on my channel, where he's talking about how the darkest parts of humanity are still part of us and they need somewhere to go. Some nipple play fetishist was watching Jason X and seeing themselves represented for the first time, and I think that's beautiful. Or, you know, they just wanted to make us squirm in our chairs and make futuristic sex as weird as they possibly could. But I do want to give them credit that, yeah, in a couple thousand years, sex will definitely change, and that was what Crimes of the Future was exploring too. I mean, you did have a guy in this movie falling in love with a robot, which is bad. I don't think we should encourage that, but I do think that might be where society is headed if we don't get a grasp on this incel problem. But judging from my DMs, my comments, even my emails, heaven forbid, I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon. Pause to read if you want. I don't really recommend it because what happened to shame? Bring back shame in 2023. Anyway, moving on to another movie that dropped in the ranks, Halloween 2 from 1981. Again, the novelty has worn off, a whole lot of nothing happens. Why is Laurie sidelined for the first 2 acts of the movie? The reason why it's here is because I probably would still choose to rewatch this movie before any of the other ones that I mentioned. It's an excellent continuation of the first movie tone-wise and mostly style-wise, except that they beefed up the kills, but it just has a nice flow for a Halloween double feature. Onward and upward, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. I really like this movie. I think it's just as fun on a rewatch, and I'll always defend it. It's the best looking Jason of the entire franchise, and maybe one of the best showdowns of the entire franchise too. The only reason why it's not higher is because the first 2 acts are such a drag. This next one though, oh baby, the tides are turning. They are quaking at the shore. Halloween Resurrection is at lucky number 13 this time around. I love this movie now. Past Kylie would spit fire. Just give a listen. Now my 29, this is also a very easy pick, goes to Halloween Resurrection. The only reason really why it is above Jason Goes to Hell is just the very simple fact that Laurie Strode is in that movie for like 2 minutes. That alone is its only redeeming quality. I don't see really any redeeming qualities in Jason Goes to Hell. Other than that, Resurrection, most of us agree, is just a god-awful, just terrible, terrible movie. That's now very ironic because I now wish that Laurie wasn't in the movie at all, because I think those first 15 minutes are the worst part of it. I love Resurrection when it's just fully embracing the reality TV parody vibes. I mean, Tyra Banks is there, for Christ's sake. I'm telling you, the beauty of knowing how bad a movie is going in the second time around kind of lets you appreciate it a bit more, because then your expectations are so low that sometimes you just end up enjoying it for what it is. This should not canonically be considered a Halloween movie at all, but here we are. But I actually love this movie. I think it's really entertaining. Up next is H2O, which has also also surprisingly dropped ranks. Upon my first viewing, I just really appreciated the late 90s slasher vibes to it. I was also really swept up by the finale of the film, and I still maintain that's probably the best ending to any Halloween movie. It's actually maybe equal to 2018, but that's debatable. But now, again, that the novelty has worn off, on my second viewing, I realized that the rest of the movie just wasn't that remarkable. Still good for what it is, and I much prefer it to Halloween Ends. So coming in above that one would be A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. It was in the mid-tier last time. I ranked it at number 18. I had so much more appreciation this time around. Like I said last time, I said that this movie just didn't fit in very well with the franchise. I don't really remember what my logic was there anymore, to be honest, but I love this movie now. I think it also did what the remake did well, where they just fully commit to having a mean Freddy. The practical effects also rock, and I love Jesse. But now, are we ready for my top 10 movies of the big three horror franchises? Coming in hot at number 10 would be Wes Craven's New Nightmare. This one was hard. I almost put Freddy's Revenge above it, but this is far and away my favorite performance of Heather Langenkamp. She's only gotten better with age. I think she's at her very best now in Mike Flanagan's The Midnight Club, but she's at her best in this franchise with New Nightmare. And this movie would have been higher if there wasn't the wasted potential of seeing how Freddy affected Robert Englund and Wes Craven, and the fact that I don't like the third act very much. The end of Freddy is very cartoonish and over the top. I'm just not a fan. Moving on to number 9 would be Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter. There's not much that can be said here that hasn't been said before. I'm just so pleasantly surprised how much I still love Crispin Glover's performance in it every single time that I watch it. I think I've seen the movie 3 or 4 times now, and his value has not decreased. That's what the rest of the franchise is missing, is engaging, weird characters like that. Because I'll never expect a plot from a Friday movie, I'm not crazy, but at least give me a good character. Speaking of good characters, at number 8 we have Jason Lives. And that's the highest that a Friday movie has made it onto this ranking, so cheers. Cheers to Jason Lives. I don't really like the Friday franchise, but I'll be damned if this is not an entertaining film. I love the characters. Our final boy and girl were both very strong. I love how meta it is, because I'm like, finally this franchise understands what's valuable about it. We just want fun action and wacky kills, and that's what this movie gave us. Again, I must brace you for how I used to speak about this movie. Some of the kills are really funny. There is a lot more humor because this movie is a lot more self-aware than a lot of the other Friday the 13th movies, which is good, but I mean, a lot of the humor didn't really land for me. I found it to just kind of be lazily written. Again, just recycling the same plot over and over. The one redeeming thing I think is Tommy Jarvis's plot line. That was kind of interesting and kind of fun. There was a little bit of action with that, but overall just, I don't know, lazily written, not super memorable. Is what it is. Told you it was bad. I was experiencing Friday the 13th burnout the first time around that I watched Jason Lives, so I don't really blame myself. My brain was starting to smooth over from the lack of stimulation. But anyway, no need to linger on my embarrassing past opinions. Next up would be Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. I'm so happy to report that I love this movie just as much the second time around. I was a little worried. I think Donald Pleasance was at his best here, starting to go mad, but walking the line nicely. Also the man, the legend, George P. Wilbur, he is my third favorite Michael Myers. Not to mention Danielle Harris acting her ever-loving heart out. She was talented straight out the womb. This one also definitely has the best fall time vibes, and it set up such a good story, and then Halloween 5 flopped over all of that. But whatever, hold on to your pantaloons for this next one. A movie that I used to place at 26 that now falls at number 6 is Halloween 3, The Season of the Witch. I maintain almost all the same opinions, but a few of them have changed drastically. Now, something that I've said is that The Season of the Witch has a really excellent story. I just think that the execution was super poor. This is mainly probably because they had to rush production. I think this came out like it was like a year or two after Halloween 2. So they had almost no time to kind of just throw this movie together, and it was honestly, it was a mess. It showed. But I've talked about The Season of the Witch plenty of times. I think if that story was remade today, it would be excellent. So pretty harsh, but back then I couldn't get over the fact that the romance in this movie was so awful. I mean, I still can't. That's why I give it 4 out of 5 stars and not anything higher. So honestly, I still would like to see a remake of it, just better character dynamics, maybe a bit better practical effects, maybe a little bit better motivation for our villain. And I would have loved to know the success this movie would have had if it wasn't called Halloween 3. Now, some things have definitely changed in my top 5, but some things are unremarkably the same, so are you ready? Dream Warriors now comes in at number 5. Yup, can I get a little commotion from the audience? Yes, Yes, I've been converted. It took 2 viewings, but it happened. The first time around, I thought the movie was only okay for whatever reason. I think it was just a little bit overhyped for me. And I do have a bit of a different perspective now. In the last year, I did have a family member that went to rehab, so a lot of the storylines hit a bit different for me now. And the second time around with this franchise, you could definitely feel the movies where Wes has involvement. There's a much different creative energy to it, and I adore it now. I give it 4 out of 5 stars, and I can't exactly remember where I dock those points, but that is what it is. It's the last movie where Freddy has any real semblance of seriousness to it, so it gives a little bit more gravity to the character's situations too. And each character's issue was pretty well rounded. I was surprised that they actually did devote enough time to fleshing out each of these characters' problems. And the practical effects, let's get a little commotion for those too. But see, a slasher can be meaningful, have a great plot, great characters, and still have really stupid, fun, gory kills. I wish Friday the 13th could take some notes. But moving along, Halloween 2018 has dropped from number 3 to number 4. I still adore this movie no matter how many times I see it. No matter how many times I hear a dorky father complain about getting peanut butter on his penis, or no matter how many times I hear a cop say what he puts on his sandwich. What can I say? James Jude Courtney, fun sequences, character development, homages. This movie has a lot going for it, and in my opinion is the best direct sequel to the original film. I don't like the brother-sister storyline at all. It's never rung true for me, never bought into it, not even in Halloween 2 or H2O. My brain is just like, nah. So Halloween 2018 sits a bit better with my spirit. Now, the movie that used to forever sit atop this ranking has been demoted from number 1 to number 3. John Carpenter's Halloween. I'm sorry if this hurts anyone. As a more seasoned movie viewer now, particularly having seen more movie classics and having rewatched a lot of movie classics now, this movie has some flaws. It's still one of my all-time favorites for how cozy it makes me feel. It's like the original Friday movie where the vibes are just so strong. Despite having minimal Halloween decor in the movie, this is just still so synonymous with fall that it gives me all the fall time vibes. But also it was shot in California. I live close to where it was shot, and so it feels kind of like a true California fall. I know it's nothing like a Midwest fall where it's supposed to take place. Anyway, all of that to say, nothing quite gets me into the Halloween spirit like this movie. Now, the next movie didn't actually move at all, but that would be A Nightmare on Elm Street. I adore this movie more and more with every single watch. I even considered putting it at number 1, so it's kind of at a tie, which surely you might be a little bit confused about what's at the number 1 spot now. I can see you over there counting the movies on your fingers like 2, 3, 4, New Beginning, 3, 4, Dream Child. Allow me to put your curious mind to rest. Halloween Kills reigns supreme. I don't know how many times I need to remind you about the man that James Jude Courtney is. This is finally a movie that I can turn my brain off to. I have a lot of trouble doing that with movies without a plot because I just need more stimulus. But this movie never has a dull moment. It starts at 500 and never slows down. The best kills of the franchise, not any franchise because it's hard to compare anything to Freddy. He has way more power and can do way weirder stuff to you, so that's not really fair. Out of Jason and Michael's kills though, Halloween Kills has the best kills of all of them. I love the flashback to the 70s, a little taste of Dr. Loomis again, the ghost story they tell at the bar, the legacy characters, and the kills. I love Halloween Kills, and maybe when I rank these movies in another 2 years, I'll hate it. Who knows? Either way, I'm always gonna be out here living my truth. I would love to know your ranking though. If not your full ranking, then your top 5 or top 10. And some of you need to stop apologizing for making long rambling comments, because what am I doing in my YouTube videos if not making long rambling comments? And if you want to hear me ramble even more, you can join my Patreon. Yes, these are the people who keep this channel funded, so a huge haunted hippie hip hooray for them. If you join over there, you get 4 to 6 bonus videos every single month, so hope to see ya. If not, all the rest of my social media and affiliate links are listed down below. Hope you enjoyed this ranking. Stay funky, stay fresh, and I hope I catch you in the next one. Bye! Oh, my back. My back. I'm old. I'm old. Ah. Oh. 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 My God. Oh. Ooh.